Thank you. I have no idea how I've been introduced, so I have to assume that it was complimentary. I haven't felt this nervous since I went for a run with Killian. I'm going to give you a history and an evolution of skyrunning and bring you to present day. A good friend said to me, when you're going to do a presentation, you need to make people look and listen and laugh from the beginning. So bear with me, and I hope that you will be impressed, have a little laugh, and keep with me. There's a little bit of humour there. It's not very serious, but it's a nice introduction to skyrunning and the evolution of skyrunning. And this talk is going to be about Faster Than Light, and we're going to finish off with a film made by the African Attachment for skyrunning and for Salmon. And the film is going to be premiered here. It's only been shown in one more place, so you're very privileged to be able to see this film. It's actually only going to be released much later this year. But skyrunning and the concept of skyrunning is something that has existed for a long time. It actually only became something more official in the early 90s. And skyrunning, the concept of skyrunning, was created by Marino Giacometti, and quite simply it's where Earth meets sky. And the simple act of running low to high is something that has been done for a long time. All generations were already skyrunners. My grandfather crossed the mountains working, for example. These are the words of Bruno Brunot, one of the first skyrunners. We as skyrunners added more speed, but in essence it has always been the same thing. Skyrunners have always existed. So in '89, when Marino Giacometti went from the town to the summit of Monte Rosa and come back down, it was the extension of something that had already been existed, but it became more formalized, it became something different. And with it, a whole new sport was created. And I, as a young teenager, remember waking up on a Saturday morning and going downstairs, and at 7 AM, we used to have a sport program called Trans World Sport. Maybe some of you have seen it, maybe not. But I remember watching this program and seeing these crazy people who running to the top of a mountain and coming down, and they looked like they were dressed as cyclists come skiers. And at the time, I had no idea, no concept of what it was, what the sport was. It just seemed something so ridiculous, so crazy. But now we look back, and it's 20 plus years of skyrunning, and it's changed and it's evolved, and how it's evolved. You know, in '92, when the first extreme sports were created in and around Chamonix and Mont Blanc, and Marino was pioneering a sport that I think now we look back and say it was ahead of its time. I think at the time it was a wonderful concept. People looked upon it and thought, wow, this is amazing. This is something we've never seen before. And it's taken a long time for everybody to catch up with the original concept of what skyrunning was. And I think noticeably since maybe 2012 with Transvolcán de Alhama, there's been a change. And that change is very much the latter part of the evolution of skyrunning, and now we're at a place where it's going to go upwards and onwards. In '94, the first extreme events were created worldwide, and you know, Laurie and Marino were travelling to Malaysia, to Nepal, to crazy places, and putting on events that most people wouldn't even contemplate now. The tricky events to do, the dangerous events, and it's part of the danger that is of interest. In '95, the Federation of Sports at Altitude was created, and that was a significant moment. And then in '98, the first skyrunning World Championships took place. So you've been able to see how the sport progressed, but the one thing that was important all the time was not only the sport itself, but scientific research. And this has been one thing that has been instrumental in skyrunning as much as the racing, is the scientific research that has gone on while events have taken place. I can't give you facts in comparison to other sports, but certainly in the sport of high altitude and running, I don't think any other sport has the data that the ISF has. 5 nations were involved, 8 group researchers, 20 years of research, 20 medical congresses, 23 publications, and 165 athletes have been studied. The test that's going on here was actually done at altitude. It was at the Pyramid Laboratory, 5,500 meters in Nepal. So the sport has great depth, and it works in 2 ways. There's what we see on a monthly, weekly basis as the ISF calendar takes place in a series of events, but there's also the scientific research that goes on in the background. 2008 was a very important time for the skyrunning. It was the road skywards, and the International Skyrunning Federation was founded, the ISF. I don't need to tell you who that is. 36 members, 31 nations, and the ISF is an observer member of the UIA. There's a photograph of Marino, ISF president, taken last year, and that is a still photograph from the film that you're going to see later. And for me, being a follower of the sport and actually seeing both sides of it, not only from a competitor point of view, but from a photographer, from a journalist, from somebody who is 110% committed to the sport, the passion of the sport, passion of running, you know, any running. It's a really key foundation to my existence. But to go back to Marino's home, to his farmhouse, and go to the local mountain with Marino, and see him run. It's an opportunity to see how the sport became where it is today. And the global picture of skyrunning is 65 countries and 600,000 athletes. The sport now, today, is huge, and it's continuing to grow. We have the Skyrunning World Series, the National Series, and the Continental Series and the Skyrunning Championships. So there's many different aspects to the sport. It's not just one thing. The sport creates huge passion, huge drama. From first to last, everyone is a skyrunner. And we see finish lines, tears, joy, excitement, as we do in all other sports. But skyrunning tends to bring out something really special. So the National Series was created just last year, with a small beginning, and now it's escalating and growing. The National Series is designed to spread skyrunning on a national level, worldwide. And I represent the UK. And of course, many people will say, skyrunning in the UK, there isn't much altitude in the UK, and I agree. But we do have technical terrain, we do have mountains, so what we lack in altitude, we have in technicality. And many of you will be aware of fell running. And fell running at the moment is becoming very, very popular in the media, particularly with some of the rounds and some of the top athletes who now cross boundaries with fell running and skyrunning. So the UK, for example, although we lack altitude, we have elevation in terms of multiple climbs and technical terrain. And the National Series will bring the skyrunning to many, many different countries. At the moment, there's 16 countries, and I think next weekend there is a big race in Australia, the Stampede. There's races now in Poland, Switzerland, Czechoslovakia. I mean, the spread is enormous, and it's ever increasing. And that will provide a grassroots for skyrunning. You know, the pinnacle of the sport is the World Series. That is the element of the sport that brings people in, people want to watch. But it's the National Series that will help develop and grow that. And currently there's 113 races with 30,000 runners just in the National Series. Each National Series will also have their championship. So for example, in the UK, we have no vertical kilometres. We're not gifted in the sense that we can have a 1,000-metre climb. But we can have sky and ultra. So for example, just like the World Series, runners will be able to take part in 3 sky races or 3 ultras, and then have a national championships within the UK. And that will be replicated throughout each individual place. So it's a formation of bringing different places, different countries together, and then eventually, when we have a world championship or whatever it may be, all these nations come together. The Continental Championship is a new addition for 2015. So, for people who understand skyrunning and the World Series always existed from 5 vertical kilometres, 5 sky races and 5 ultras. And as a runner, you could participate as somebody for vertical kilometre, for sky racing, or for ultra. If you were Killian, you did all 3. But most people will choose 1 or maybe 2. But to qualify for the overall ranking, you needed to do 3 races in each of the categories to gain points to be classified in the overall ranking. This year, that still continues, but now the Continental Championships brings in 1 other element. So you now need the 3 plus 1. And that's important because we're including continents, which brings world into a great perspective. It means that the runners have more opportunities to travel. It also means that the people who are based in Asia have a race on their home ground where they can gain points, and then the incentive is then for them to come to Europe or Spain or France, Italy, wherever it may be, to then enter into the World Series. So currently there's 12 races, and as I said, they're valid for the Skyrunner World Series points. This is an image that, for me, very much sums up what the sport is about. It's about mountains. It's about how small we are within the mountain. Killian said to me once that the mountain is always the boss. No matter how good you think you are, no matter how fast you are, no matter how much your ability in the mountains is estimated by others to be at the pinnacle, and it's fair to say within skyrunning and the crossover between running and mountains, Killian is the pinnacle. And when he says the mountain is always the boss, you have to give the mountain respect. This image for me is clever. We're small within the concept. So the World Series ranking is ultimately how we end up with points at the end of each year, and the ranking moves as races go on. So the ranking is based on the top 40 men and the top 15 ladies, and the scoring, as I said, comes from 3 races plus 1. The vertical, the sky, and the ultra are the crux of the sport, and as I said, runners will participate in one series or 2 series. And there's many formulas that are used by the ISF to create those points. And of course that ranking is then used year upon year as to creating a grading system. So for example, we understand who the top 10 athletes may be at a particular race based on that ranking. So it's a valuable piece of information. This photograph was taken at Matterhorn Ultracks 2 days after Killian had gone to the top and come back down and set a record. 2 different aspects of the sport. An FKT, a fastest known time, and then Killian racing. I don't think there's many people that could go to the summit and come back down and breathe a record that stood for many, many years, and then a couple of days later toe the line at a race and race somebody, for example, like Luis Alberto Hernando, and still win with tired legs. It's an impressive feat, and it's the type of thing that we see in our sport all the time. Top ladies, top men racing against each other and producing some incredible things. That's an image taken at Trofeo Kima. For me, the race that holds most dear in my heart of what a real pure skyrunning race is. Incredible mountains, incredible technicality, an amazing course. So the 2015 ISF calendar is built from a series of elements: the National Series, the National Championships, the Continental Championships, the Skyrunner World Series in vertical, sky, and ultra. And just to give you an idea of the technicality of Trofeo Kima, there's one section. This is Fulvio David, and you'll see that his left leg is just lifting off. Well, 2 inches to his left is a 2,000-meter drop. So if you're not holding that chain on your right-hand side, and the ledges are a little bit like this sort of wide. It gives you an idea of the concept of skyrunning, where running and mountaineering cross to create this very, very unique sport. There's a skyrunning map there, and on that map it probably doesn't relate too well in a visual for you to see, but it shows you the spread of skyrunning worldwide in the Continental, the National and the World Series. I guess the important thing is there's dots down on the left and there's dots down on the right, which means it goes a long way. Again, a photograph of Killian. It's very, very difficult to put a presentation together for skyrunning and not have Killian everywhere, because he has very much dominated the sport. Here, again, this is Trofeo Kima, and this was a quote that he gave me. Picture a mountain terrain that has no paths amidst glaciers. It is all crests, rocks, stretches of via ferrata, and over a course that stretches 50 kilometers. Kima is not athletics, it's mountaineering, pure skyrunning. And I think as an example of a pure skyrunning course, nothing comes close to Kima. So the 2015 Skyrunner World Series is already imminent. May is very, very close, and Transvolcania will be the start within Europe. 30,000 athletes will take part this year in 5, 5 and 5. 5 vertical kilometers, short and sweet, up to 1,000 meters, go as fast as you possibly can. Sky races, which are typically less than 5 hours, and ultra, which is 6 hours plus. I say plus because it depends on who's racing, and the winners will be quick, the rest of the participants may take a little longer. So some of the stats for the 2015 World Series. The ISF have $375,000 of benefits. $200,000 are spent on athletes, accommodation and travel. So that's bringing athletes from around the world to take part in a series of events within the World Series. There's $125,000 of race prizes, and then $25,000 for the Skyrunner World Series final. So the one thing that has been really important in everything that the ISF done is also giving back to the sport, realising that the runners have an opportunity to make a living and to get prize money for winning, for achieving. So the other aspect and part of this evolution has been media coverage. And I mentioned before about 2012 and Transvolcania. And I think for me, Transvolcania was a pivotal moment for the ISF and for skyrunning. Laura Marino realised that it was time for change, and they had a very, very key idea of how to make that change. And Transvolcania was the start of the Ultra Series. And what they did was they brought runners from all over the world to take part in that race. And the media attention that came with that has very much kick-started sort of a regeneration of the sport, a reintroduction of the sport to people all over the world. And certainly there's a lot of people, and I speak to them, that think that skyrunning was created in 2012. They think that the sport was actually only 3 or 4 years old, and when you tell them that it dates back to 1989, some of them are quite shocked. So the media coverage is important, and we've seen that grow. So some of the numbers here are very, very significant in how we have created and built up that. So Last year, there was 848 publications that we know of that documented skyrunning in one way or the other. The ISF skyrunning page on Facebook has rocketed to 53,000 likes. And I wish I had the stat for what it was before 2014, but I know in 2012 it was probably around about 5,000 likes, and it gives you an indication of how that has grown. And then 16,000 Twitter followers in 95 countries. It's significant, really, really significant. Skyrunning is a niche sport within a niche sport. So these sorts of figures show how the sport is growing and progressing. And here's just a snippet of some of the media coverage, from the New York Times to the Guardian to the Independent. The coverage is literally worldwide now. And of course, we have a lot of people to thank for that. There's media all over the world that help create the presence that we need. Also, the magazines and the newspapers are beginning to look at what skyrunning is, and they don't understand it. And because they don't understand it, it's exciting to them. You see a mountain, and you see a runner on a mountain with no visible path and a vertical drop, and they think, that's crazy. And we know that crazy is good. Crazy is what people like. So, one of the important aspects for the ISF and the Skyrunning World Series is partnership and sponsorship, and it's important that Salomon, Scott, Active Patch, Compress Sport, Alpina Watches, Innovate, Arc'teryx, and La Sportiva all combine to help the series happen. And what's interesting in those names is a lot of them are competitors. You know, it's not very often in sport where you would see, say, Salomon lined up against La Sportiva. They tend to want a dominance. You know, if a race or an event is sponsored by a particular brand, they tend to want exclusivity. But the ISF and the Skyrunning World Series brings all these brands together in the hope that they all feed off each other, and the brands understand that, and that's very important for the growth of the sport and the brand. So I'm going to finish with Marino on his favourite mountain, silhouetted by a cloud. And Marino said to me, skyrunning differs to other sports, and this is the discipline we launched in the late 90s. Skyrunning has always existed all across the world. It's just that it became formalised as a sport. I therefore consider myself the father of skyrunning for that aspect of race organisation, because when it started 25 years ago, nobody talked about this. Well, the one thing that's for sure now is that people are talking about it, and they're talking about less cloud and more sky. Thank you.